The north is cold and full of whispers.
The wall stood 700 feet high, ancient ice fused with stone and magic, a scar across the world that separated the living from the dead. On its crown, where the wind cut like a blade and the air tasted of snow that had never melted, Jon Snow stood watch. He was 16 years old. The black of the night's watch hung heavy on his shoulders, wool and leather that smelled of smoke and sweat, and the peculiar coldness that came from sleeping in Castle Black's drafty chambers. His breath misted in the air before him, each exhalation a small ghost that vanished into the gray morning. Behind him, the haunted forest stretched endlessly, a dark green sea broken by white where snow had settled in the branches. Before him, the gift lay empty, and beyond that, somewhere past the edge of sight, the north waited. The north, where his brother ruled as king. Jon's hand rested on the pommel of Longclaw, the Valyrian steel bastard sword Lord Commander Mormont had given him after Jon saved his life from a white. The white wolf head that formed the pommel was cold beneath his palm, even through his glove. The sword had been his companion through ranging and battle, through the hardest year of his life. At his feet, ghosts lay pressed against the merlin, the direwolf's massive body a pool of white against dark stone. The wolf's red eyes were open, unblinking, fixed on something Jon could not see. Ghost never made sound. He was silent as his name, silent as falling snow, but his ears flicked back and forth, tracking movements in the air that Jon's duller senses could not catch. "Storm coming," said a voice behind him. Jon turned. Grenn climbed the last few steps to the top of the wall, his broad face red with cold and exertion. He had grown thicker since they'd come to Castle Black together, his shoulders filling out with the work of the watch. They had been green boys then, foolish and frightened. The wall had carved the foolishness away. "Always a storm coming," Jon said. Grenn moved to the edge and looked down. 700 feet of ice dropped away beneath them, slick and pale blue where the sun caught it. Men at the base looked like ants. "Aye, but this one's different. Bowen Marsh says the wildlings are massing at the Milkwater. Thousands of them, maybe tens of thousands." Jon's jaw tightened. They had all heard the rumors, whispers carried by rangers who came back from beyond the wall with haunted eyes, and tales of an army gathering under a king named Mance Rayder. The king beyond the wall, they called him. A deserter from the Night's Watch who had united the free folk into a host not seen in living memory. "How many is Marsh sending out to scout?" Jon asked. "None. Says it's too dangerous. Says we should man the wall and wait." Jon's eyes flicked to the forest. Waiting meant letting the wildlings choose when to strike. Waiting meant ignorance, and ignorance killed men. "The old bear wouldn't wait," Jon said quietly. Grenn's expression shifted. They all felt Jorah Mormont's absence like a missing tooth, the space where something vital used to be. The Lord Commander had died beyond the wall at Craster's Keep, murdered by his own men in a mutiny born of hunger and fear. Jon had not been there. He had been with the wildlings, playing the role of turncloak, gathering information for a ranging that would never return whole. "The old bear's dead," Grenn said, and there was no accusation in it, only the flat truth that came from living with loss. "Marsh commands now. We do as he says." Jon said nothing. Bowen Marsh was a cautious man, capable but unimaginative, the kind of commander who followed procedures and precedents. He was not the man to face what was coming. Ghost rose abruptly, a fluid motion that brought him to his feet without sound. The direwolf's head swung south. His ears pricked forward, his body tense as a drawn bow. A low vibration ran through him. Not quite a growl, but something deeper, a warning that lived in his chest. Jon's hand tightened on Longclaw. "What is it, boy?" The wolf did not move, did not look at Jon. His gaze remained fixed south, toward the lands beyond the gift, toward the kingdoms of men where wars were fought over iron chairs and crowns of gold. Grenn followed Jon's gaze. "He does that sometimes, doesn't he? Stares at nothing." "Not nothing," Jon said. The bond between him and Ghost was something he had never understood, something that defied the logic Maester Luwin had taught him in Winterfell's library. When he slept, he sometimes dreamed he was the wolf running through snow with 4 legs instead of 2, tasting the world through a nose that could smell fear and blood and the difference between friend and enemy. The Maesters said such things were impossible. Jon knew otherwise. Ghost turned his great head and looked at Jon with eyes the color of fresh blood. The wolf's gaze was steady, unblinking, and for a moment Jon felt something pass between them. Urgency, warning, a pull southward like a hand on his chest. "Jon," Gren's voice was uncertain. "I need to go below," Jon said abruptly. He did not wait for Gren's response. He moved to the cage that would lower him down the wall, Ghost padding silently at his heels. The wind picked up as he descended, rattling the chains, making the cage sway. The ice face of the wall passed in a blur of blue and white, and Jon's mind was already elsewhere, south, toward the brother he had not seen in more than a year. Castle Black squatted at the base of the wall like a collection of broken teeth. The buildings were old and poorly maintained, their roofs patched with whatever material could be scrounged, their walls stained black with soot from countless fires. The yards were mud and packed snow churned by boots and hooves. It was not a place of beauty. It was a place of function, stripped to essentials by centuries of neglect and the hard reality of defending an impossible length of ice. Jon crossed the yard with Ghost at his side. Men moved out of their way without thinking, eyes flicking to the massive direwolf and then away. Fear and respect in equal measure. The wolf was nearly as tall as a pony now, his shoulder coming up to Jon's ribs, his body lean and powerful beneath his white fur. More than one black brother had compared Ghost to the wolves of legend, the dire wolves that had been extinct south of the wall for 200 years before the Stark children found their pups in the snow. The armory door stood open, firelight spilling out into the gray morning. Jon ducked inside, welcoming the warmth. Donald Noyes stood at his forge, his massive arm working the bellows, his stump where his left arm had been hanging at his side. The one-armed blacksmith had been at the wall longer than Jon had been alive, a veteran of Robert's rebellion who had forged King Robert's warhammer before a siege wound had taken his arm and sent him to the watch. "Snow," Noye said without looking up. "You're early. Figured you'd be on the wall until midday." "Marsh rotates us off early now," Jon said. "Says we need to be fresh if the wildlings attack." Noye grunted. The sound could have meant anything. He pulled a glowing sword blade from the coals and laid it on his anvil, began hammering it with methodical precision. The ring of steel on steel filled the armory, steady as a heartbeat. Jon watched the blade take shape, the orange glow fading to red as the metal cooled. His father had taught him that a man who could not make his own blade was at the mercy of those who could. Ned Stark had never forged a sword in his life, but he had understood the principle. Jon had tried in those early days at Castle Black, when everything had been new and terrible and strange, but his hands lacked the skill. He could sharpen a blade, repair mail, perform the basic maintenance that kept a fighting man alive. He could not create. "You hear about the king?" Noya asked. Jon's head snapped up. "Which king?" "The young wolf. Your brother." Noya set down his hammer and studied the blade critically, turning it to catch the light. "Raven came this morning. He's marching his army to the twins for a wedding." Jon's throat tightened. "Whose wedding?" "His uncle's. Edmure Tully is marrying one of old Walder Frey's daughters. Alliance business, I'd wager. Buying back the Freys after the young wolf broke his own marriage pact." Noya's eyes flicked to Jon. "You knew about that? Your brother marrying the Westerling girl instead of the Frey?" "I knew," Jon said quietly. "The news had reached the wall months ago, carried by traders and travelers who brought gossip along with supplies. Robb had won every battle and lost the war anyway, they said. He had married for love and made an enemy of the Freys. He had executed Lord Rickard Karstark for murdering prisoners and lost half his army when the Karstarks marched home. He had burned the Westerlands and then retreated east, his forces dwindling, his crown heavy as an anvil. King Robb, the brother Jon had grown up beside, trained beside, the boy who had been his closest friend before the wall had claimed Jon and the crown had claimed Robb. They had been 14 when they last saw each other, 15 now, nearly 16, though Jon had lost track of his name day. Time moved strangely at the wall. "The twins," Jon repeated. His mind pulled up the map Maester Luwin had drilled into them as children. The twins sat on the green fork of the Trident, the only crossing for hundreds of miles, 2 castles connected by a bridge. Lord Walder Frey's seat, the man they called the late Lord Frey for arriving too late to fight at the Trident during Robert's rebellion. "Aye," Noya said. "Buying back Frey's support with a wedding. Smart if it works. The young wolf needs those men." He returned the blade to the coals. "War's not going well for your brother, Snow. Lannisters and Tyrells have joined up. 100,000 men between them, maybe more. And now that Stannis lost at the Blackwater, there's no one left to fight them but Robb." Jon's hand had gone to Longclaw's pommel again, without him noticing. His fingers traced the wolf's head, the familiar contours grounding him. "He'll find a way," Jon said, and heard the hollowness of it even as he spoke. "Maybe," Noye said. "If he's lucky. If the Freys stay bought. If the Boltons stay loyal. If a dozen other things break his way." The blacksmith pulled the blade from the coals and examined it. "You should write to him." "I can't," Jon said automatically. "I'm a brother of the Night's Watch now. I have no family." "No, you're a boy who misses his brother," Noye interrupted, his voice flat as hammered iron. "The Watch took your name and your future, Snow. It didn't take your heart. Write to him. Tell him you're proud of him, or that you're worried, or whatever it is you need to say. Before you don't have the chance." The words struck something in Jon's chest that he had not known was there. Before you don't have the chance. How many men had he known who died with words unspoken, letters unwritten, love unexpressed, because duty or pride or simple cowardice had locked their tongues? "I'll think about it," Jon said. Noye nodded once, satisfied, and returned to his work. Jon left the armory and crossed the yard to the rookery, Ghost trailing behind him like a shadow. The rookery was a round stone tower that smelled of bird droppings and old straw. Ravens muttered and rustled in their cages, black eyes glinting. Maester Aemon sat in his chair near the window, blind eyes staring at nothing, his gnarled hands folded in his lap. He was ancient, over 100 years old, men said, and his skin had the texture of parchment left too long in the sun. "Jon Snow," the old man said without turning his head. "I wondered when you would come." Jon stopped. "You heard the raven?" "I hear all the ravens, boy. I may be blind, but I am not deaf." Aemon's mouth curved slightly. "Your brother marches to the twins. You are worried." It was not a question. Jon moved to stand beside the maester's chair, looking out the window at the wall's vast expanse. "Should I be? That is not for me to say. I am a maester of the Citadel and a man of the Night's Watch. I have forsworn family." But there was something in the old man's voice that suggested he knew the weight of that forswearing, knew it down to his bones. Maester Aemon had been born Aemon Targaryen, a prince who had given up his claim to the throne to serve the realm. He had outlived his entire family, watched dragons die and kings fall, and in the end he had chosen the wall over a crown. Jon had always thought that was the ultimate sacrifice. Now he was not so sure. "What if something happens to him?" Jon asked quietly. "Then you will grieve," Aemon said. "As I grieved for my brothers, my nephews, all the Targaryens who burned and died while I stood here and did nothing." The old man's hands tightened on his lap. "The gods give us choices, Jon Snow. Duties that conflict, loves that pull us in different directions, and they give us no answers, only the weight of consequence." Jon watched a raven hop from perch to perch, its claws clicking on wood. "I swore an oath." "You did. And you will keep it, or you will break it, and either way you will live with what you chose." Aemon turned his blind eyes toward Jon, and somehow they seemed to see more than sighted eyes could. "But choose knowing this. The night is coming when we will need every man who can hold a sword. The wildlings mass beyond our borders. Things stir in the darkness that have not stirred in 1,000 years. If you ride south to save your brother, you may damn us all." The words settled over Jon like snow, cold and inescapable. He had known this, of course. Had known it since the moment he swore his vows in the gods' wood, speaking the words that would bind him until death. He was the shield that guards the realms of men, not the shield that guards one man, however much he loved him. "I won't leave," Jon said. His voice came out firm, certain, though his chest felt hollow. "Good," Aemon said. "Because there are storms coming, Jon Snow, from the north and from the south, and we will need wolves to weather them." That night, Jon dreamed. He was running through snow, his forelegs eating up the ground in long, loping strides. The world tasted different in this form, sharper, richer, full of information his human nose could never detect. He smelled pine and frozen earth, the musk of deer, the acrid tang of fear. He was Ghost, and he was hunting. The forest opened before him, trees giving way to clearings and then closing in again. He ran south, always south, drawn by something he could not name. Behind him, the wall rose like a white shadow, but he did not look back. The pull was ahead, a thread leading him toward danger, blood, the stench of treachery so thick it made his hackles rise. He burst from the trees into a different landscape, one where the snow gave way to green grass and gentle hills. A river ran before him, wide and dark. On its bank stood two castles, identical twins of gray stone, connected by a bridge. Torches burned in windows, men moved on the walls. And inside there was screaming, the smell of blood, thick and copper-rich. Steel striking steel, flesh tearing. His brother's scent, familiar as his own, mixed with pain and fear and the bitter knowledge of betrayal. Jon woke gasping, his body tangled in his blankets, sweat cold on his skin despite the room's chill. His heart hammered against his ribs like it wanted to escape. Ghost stood at the foot of his bed, massive and still in the darkness. The direwolf's eyes glowed red, reflecting the embers in the hearth. "What did you see?" Jon whispered. Ghost stared at him, and Jon felt it again, the pull southward, urgent now, desperate. Something was wrong. Something was happening or about to happen, and he was 700 miles away and powerless to stop it. He threw off his blankets and dressed quickly, fingers fumbling with laces and buckles. The castle was quiet around him, most of the watch asleep. Only the men on the wall and the guards at the gate would be awake at this hour. Jon strapped Longclaw to his hip and left his chamber, Ghost padding silently beside him. He moved through the corridors by memory, avoiding the places where floorboards creaked or where light from the watchfires might give him away. He was not sure where he was going until he found himself in the common room, where the Black brothers gathered to eat and dice and tell lies. A fire burned low in the hearth. Pip and Gren sat at one of the tables playing cards, their voices low. They looked up as Jon entered. "Snow," Pip said. "Couldn't sleep?" Jon shook his head. He moved to the hearth and stood before it, letting the heat seep into him. The fire cast dancing shadows on the walls. In the flames, he thought he could see shapes, castles, men, steel catching light. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Gren said. He laughed at his own joke, then stopped when Jon did not laugh with him. Jon turned to face them. "I need your help." The two exchanged glances. Pip set down his cards carefully. "What kind of help?" "The kind that could get us killed," Jon said, "or at least hanged for desertion." The room went quiet except for the fire's crackle. Ghost moved to sit beside Jon, the direwolf's shoulder pressed against his leg. Gren's face had gone serious. "What are you planning?" "I'm going to the twins," Jon said. The words came out steady, certain, though his heart was racing. "My brother's there. He's in danger. I can feel it." "Feel it how?" Pip asked. Jon looked at Ghost. The direwolf stared back, unblinking. "The way Ghost feels things. The way the wolves always know." Pip stood slowly. "Jon, you can't. You swore an oath. If you leave, you're a deserter. They'll hunt you down and take your head." "I know." "Then why?" "Because he's my brother," Jon said, and the simplicity of it cut through all the arguments, all the logic that said he should stay, all the duty that bound him to the wall. "Because he's riding into a trap and I'm the only one who knows it. Because if I stay here and he dies, I'll spend the rest of my life knowing I could have saved him." Gren and Pipe looked at each other. Jon saw the conflict in their faces. Loyalty to him, loyalty to the Watch, fear of what would happen if they helped him. "How would you even get there?" Gren asked finally. "It's 700 miles through country that's mostly at war. The Ironborn hold Moat Catelyn, the Boltons hold the north, the Freys hold the twins. You'd never make it. I'll take the King's Road to Moat Catelyn, go around through the bogs with the Cranogmen, then ride hard for the twins." Jon's mind was racing now, planning, calculating. "It's 800 miles, maybe more. If I ride dawn to dusk with fresh horses, I can do it in 12 days, maybe less." 12 days, Pip repeated. "When's the wedding?" Jon's stomach dropped. He did not know. The Raven had said Robb was marching to the twins for a wedding, but had not said when. "If the wedding was tomorrow, or in 3 days, or—" "I have to leave tonight," Jon said. "Now. If I wait until I know the date, it'll be too late." "This is madness," Gren said, but his voice lacked conviction. Jon looked at his friends. Brothers, truly, bound by vows and shared suffering in the strange alchemy that turned boys into men in the frozen north. "I know, but I'm asking anyway. Will you help me?" Silence stretched. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Then Pipe sighed. "You'll need supplies. Food for the road. A cloak that's not black. You can't ride south dressed like a crow." "I can get a horse from the stables," Gren said slowly. "One of the ranging's horses. Fast one. And I know where Marsh keeps the coin for buying supplies. Not much, but enough for a few fresh mounts on the road. Jon felt something loosen in his chest. Thank you. Don't thank us yet, Pipe said. Thank us if you make it back alive. If you don't, he shrugged. Well, we'll tell them you hit your head and wandered off delirious. They'll never believe it, but at least we'll have tried. They moved quickly after that, years of watch discipline turning planning into action. Pip raided the stores for dried meat, hard cheese, oatcakes that would last weeks without spoiling. Gren disappeared to the stables and returned with a gray mare, strong-looking, her eyes intelligent. Jon changed into a ranger's traveling gear, dark leather and wool that could pass for civilian clothes, if he left off the black cloak. He strapped Longclaw across his back. The Valyrian steel blade was too fine for a common traveler, but he would not leave it behind. If he was riding into danger, he would ride armed. When everything was ready, they stood in the yard near the gate. The sky above was black, scattered with stars. The wall rose behind them, a pale mass blotting out half the heavens. One more thing, Jon said. He pulled out a folded piece of parchment, words he had written by candlelight, while the others gathered supplies. Give this to Maester Aemon. Tomorrow, not before. Pip took the letter. What does it say? That I'm sorry. That I know what I'm doing is wrong. That I'll come back and face justice if I can. Jon swung into the saddle. The mare shifted beneath him, sensing his tension. Ghost stood at her feet, a pale shadow in the darkness. That the watch is my life, but Robb is my blood. And blood calls to blood, louder than any oath. Gren reached up and gripped Jon's hand. Ride fast. And if you see the young wolf, tell him the North remembers. Jon nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He touched his heels to the mare's flanks, and she started forward. Ghost loped beside him, silent as always, the direwolf's white form visible even in the dark. The gate guards were men Jon knew, brothers who had trained with him. They saw him coming, and one moved to block the way, then stopped when he saw Ghost. The direwolf's red eyes glowed in the torchlight. Let him pass, one guard said quietly to the other. I saw nothing. The gate opened. Jon rode through into the darkness beyond. Behind him, Castle Black disappeared into the night. Ahead, the King's Road stretched south, a ribbon of packed earth and stone, leading toward the heart of the Seven Kingdoms, toward war, toward his brother, toward whatever doom or salvation awaited at the Twins. The North swallowed Jon whole. He rode through the Gift first, that wide stretch of abandoned farmland that belonged to the Watch. The fields lay fallow, buildings collapsed into ruins, the land returning slowly to wilderness. Once this had been settled country, populated by men and women who paid their taxes to the Watch in exchange for protection. That was centuries ago. Now only ghosts remained. Jon pushed the mare hard, faster than was wise, but urgency drove him like a whip. Every hour that passed was an hour closer to the wedding, closer to whatever his dream vision had shown him. He did not let himself think about what he was doing, about the oaths he was breaking with every mile. If he thought too much, he would turn back. Ghost ranged ahead, sometimes visible, sometimes disappearing into the trees or the tall grass. The direwolf moved like water, effortless, tireless. Jon envied him that. The mare was strong, but she was not made for this pace. He would need to find fresh horses soon. On the second day, he reached the edge of the Gift and entered the North proper. The land changed, subtly. More trees, denser forest, the occasional burned farmstead or abandoned village. Evidence of war. The Ironborn had raided here, and the small folk had fled or died. Jon stopped at a stream to let the mare drink. She was lathered, her sides heaving. He had pushed her too hard. Guilt pricked him, but he shoved it aside. He would buy her replacement at the next town and let her rest. He knelt by the stream and drank from his cupped hands. The water was cold, clean, tasting of stone and ice. It cleared his head slightly, washing away some of the fog that came from riding dawn to dusk without proper rest. Ghost appeared from the trees, his muzzle wet. The direwolf sat beside Jon, and for a moment they were just a boy and his wolf, resting by a stream as they might have done in the Wolf's Wood near Winterfell. We're going to him, Jon said quietly. We're going to get there in time. Ghost's red eyes watched him. The wolf did not agree or disagree. He simply existed, a creature of instinct and certainty, untroubled by the human concerns of oaths and honor and the terrible weight of choice. Jon stood. Come on. We have 500 miles left to ride. The days blurred together after that. Jon rode through forest and field, skirted around holdfasts and villages where Stark banners should have flown, but now flew nothing, or worse. The flayed man of Bolton. The North was at war with itself, torn between loyalty to the young wolf and fear of the Dreadfort's new power. He bought a fresh horse in a village whose name he never learned, paying with the coin Gren had stolen. The villagers looked at him with suspicious eyes, noting his sword, his direwolf, the hardness in his face that came from months at the wall. They took his silver and gave him a roan gelding, strong-looking and mean-tempered. He rode on. On the fourth day he reached the edges of the swamps that marked the neck. Moat Catelyn should have been here, the ancient fortress that guarded the North's southern approach, but the Ironborn held it now. Balon Greyjoy's reavers who had taken the North's gateway while the Northern army fought in the south. Jon could not go through Moat Catelyn. He would have to go around, through the bogs and channels that the Cranogmen called home. He had never met a Cranogman, but he knew the stories. Howland Reed, Lord of Greywater Watch, had been his father's closest friend. Had fought beside Ned Stark at the Tower of Joy, wherever that was, whatever that meant. The Cranogmen were small people, frog-eaters, living in a castle that moved through the swamps and could not be found unless it wanted to be. Jon guided the roan gelding off the King's Road and into the marsh. The ground turned soft almost immediately, the horses' hooves sinking into mud. Trees grew twisted here, their roots exposed, their branches hung with moss. The air smelled of rot and stagnant water. Ghost moved ahead, his white form stark against the brown and green. The direwolf picked his way through the bog with the sureness of instinct, finding solid ground where Jon's eyes saw only murky water. They traveled slowly now, feeling their way forward. Jon's boots were soon soaked, his legs wet to the knee from wading through shallow water. The roan gelding snorted and balked, unhappy with the footing. "Easy," Jon murmured, patting the horse's neck. "Just a little further. Then we're back on solid ground." But solid ground did not come. The swamps stretched endlessly, a maze of water and mud and moss-covered trees. Jon began to wonder if he had made a mistake, if he should have tried to slip past Moat Catelyn somehow instead of trusting to the bogs. Then Ghost stopped. The direwolf's ears pricked forward, his body tense. Jon's hand went to Longclaw's hilt. "What is it?" A man appeared from behind a tree so suddenly that Jon's heart lurched. He was small, barely 5 feet tall, dressed in browns and greens that blended with the swamp. A net hung at his belt, and a frog spear rested in his hands. His eyes were green as the moss. "You're far from the wall, Crow," the man said. His voice was soft, barely louder than the wind in the reeds. Jon's throat was dry. "I'm not. I'm going to the twins, to warn my brother." The Cranogman's eyes narrowed. "Your brother? Robb Stark, the king in the north." Silence. The Cranogman studied Jon with those unsettling green eyes. Then he lowered his spear slightly. "You have the Stark look, and that's a dire wolf at your side. Haven't seen one of those south of the wall in lifetimes." "I need to get through the neck," Jon said. "The Ironborn hold Moat Catelyn. I can't go that way." "No," the Cranogman agreed. "You can't. But there are other ways, older ways, if you know them." Hope flared in Jon's chest. "Will you show me?" The Cranogman was quiet for a long moment, considering. Then he nodded once. "Lord Reed fought beside your father. He'd want us to help his son. Follow me. Stay close. The bogs don't forgive mistakes." He turned and disappeared into the marsh. Jon urged his horse forward, following the small figure through water and mud and channels that looked identical but somehow, miraculously, led somewhere. Ghost moved beside him, the wolf's presence a comfort in this strange, dangerous place. They traveled for hours, winding through the swamp in patterns Jon could not follow. The sun was invisible through the canopy, the world reduced to green and brown and gray. His legs ached from the saddle, his eyes burned from strain, but he did not complain. Finally, impossibly, the ground began to slope upward. Trees gave way to solid earth. The horses' hooves struck stone instead of mud. They had passed through the neck. The Cranogman stopped at the edge of the swamp. Beyond him, the land opened up. Fields and forests, proper roads, the lands of the Riverlands where men fought for kings and crowns. "The King's Road is 3 miles east," the Cranogman said. "Follow it south. The twins are 5 days' hard ride from here, maybe less if you kill your horse getting there." "Thank you," Jon said. "I don't know your name." Better you don't, the Cranogman replied. He looked at Ghost, then back at Jon. The wolf knows something is wrong. I can see it in him. Whatever you're riding toward, Crow, it's dark and it's bloody. Be ready. Then he turned and vanished into the swamp as silently as he had appeared. Jon sat on his horse at the edge of the bog, the neck behind him, the riverlands ahead. 5 days to the twins. 5 days to reach Robb before what? He touched his heels to the roan's flanks. The horse started forward, and Jon rode south into lands he had never seen, toward a brother he had not spoken to in more than a year, toward a destiny he could feel approaching like a storm. Ghost loped beside him, silent and deadly, the wolf's red eyes fixed on the horizon. The riverlands were burning. Not everywhere, not all at once, but in patches. Farmsteads reduced to blackened timbers, villages empty of everything but corpses, fields trampled by armies moving back and forth across the same ground like pieces on a Sivas board. Jon rode through the carnage and felt something harden in his chest. This was what war looked like. Not the clean stories of tourneys and noble knights, but mud and blood and small folk caught between powers they could not control or comprehend. He passed a dead woman in a ditch, her body already bloating in the sun, crows picking at her eyes. He passed children's bodies hanging from a tree, their crime unknown, their punishment absolute. He passed burned sept and broken mill, and a dog eating something that had once been human. The roan gelding shied at the smells, at the rot and smoke that hung over everything. Jon kept him moving, eyes forward, trying not to look too closely at the ruin around him. Ghost ranged ahead, a white shape moving through gray landscape, occasionally disappearing into the trees before reappearing further down the road. They were 7 days out from Castle Blackmow. The Cranogman had said 5 days to the twins from the next edge, but Jon had lost time finding the King's Road, more time avoiding patrols, Lannister men in their crimson cloaks, mounted knights whose allegiance he could not determine from a distance. He rode in ranger's leathers with his cloak hood up, Longclaw hidden under his cloak, trying to look like a common traveler. But common travelers did not ride alone through war-torn country with direwolves at their side. On the 8th day, he saw his first real obstacle. The road ahead was blocked by men, a dozen of them, wearing mismatched armor and carrying weapons that had seen heavy use. Not soldiers, brigands, the kind of men who followed armies like ravens, picking over the leavings, preying on the weak. Jon's hand moved to Longclaw's hilt beneath his cloak. The men had not seen him yet. He could turn back, find another route, avoid the confrontation. But turning back meant losing time, and time was the one thing he could not afford to lose. He rode forward. The brigands noticed him when he was 50 yards away. They spread out across the road, hands on weapons, grins on their faces. They saw a lone rider on a tired horse. Easy prey, that's far enough, one called out. He was tall and scarred with a beard that had gone gray at the edges. A leader, or at least the biggest bully in the pack. Road tax, 10 silver stags to pass. Jon reined in the roan. I don't have 10 silver stags. Then you can leave the horse, and the cloak, and whatever else you're carrying. The bearded man's eyes narrowed. That's a fine sword under your cloak. That'll do nicely. I'm not giving you anything, Jon said. His voice came out steady despite the hammering of his heart. Let me pass. The brigands laughed. 2 of them moved to flank Jon, cutting off retreat. The bearded man drew a long knife, its blade notched from use. Boy, you've got stones, I'll give you that. But stones don't stop steel. Now get off that horse before we drag you off. Ghost emerged from the trees. The direwolf moved without sound, appearing on the road behind Jon like a white shadow given form. He was enormous, as tall as the roan gelding's shoulder, his body heavy with muscle beneath his fur, his teeth visible when he opened his mouth, his red eyes fixed on the brigands with predator's focus. The bearded man went pale. What in the 7 hells? That's a direwolf, one of the others said, his voice high with fear. Those things are extinct. It's not extinct, Jon said quietly. And if you don't move, he'll tear your throat out before you can scream. The brigand stared at Ghost. The direwolf stared back, unblinking, his massive body coiled to spring. Jon could feel the tension in him, the barely restrained violence. Ghost wanted blood. Jon could feel it through their bond, the hunger and the rage, and the simple animal certainty that these men were threats to be eliminated. Easy, Jon murmured. though he was not sure if he was speaking to Ghost or to himself. The bearded man's knife hand shook. He looked at Jon, then at Ghost, then back at Jon. "You're a warg, one of those northern demon summoners." Jon did not correct him. Let them think what they wanted. Fear was a weapon as useful as steel. "Move," Jon said. The brigands moved. They scattered like crows before a hawk, stumbling over each other in their haste to get off the road. The bearded man dropped his knife and ran, dignity forgotten, survival paramount. Jon urged the roan forward. Ghost padded beside him. The wolf's body relaxed now, the immediate threat gone. They passed through where the brigands had stood and continued south, leaving the men behind to whatever fate awaited them in this broken land. On the 9th day, Jon's horse went lame. The roan had been flagging for hours, his gait uneven, his breathing labored. Jon had pushed him too hard, demanded too much from an animal that had given everything it could. When the gelding finally pulled up limping, Jon felt a stab of guilt, sharp as a knife. He dismounted and examined the horse's leg. The hoof was cracked, the lameness beyond quick repair. The roan would need rest, proper care, time Jon did not have. He stood on the empty road and looked south. How far to the twins? 3 days? 4? Too far to walk, too far to run. He needed another horse, but the last village he had passed was miles behind him and had looked empty, abandoned, or destroyed. Ghost sat on his haunches and watched Jon with those red eyes. The wolf seemed patient, unconcerned. Time meant nothing to animals. "We can't stop," Jon said aloud. His voice sounded strange in the empty landscape. "We have to keep moving." The wolf tilted his head, a gesture almost human in its questioning. Jon closed his eyes. He could feel Ghost there in his mind, a presence at the edge of consciousness. The bond between them was strongest when Jon slept, when his human thoughts quieted, and the wolf's instincts rose to fill the space. But sometimes, in moments of desperation or danger, Jon could touch that connection while waking, could see through Ghost's eyes, smell through Ghost's nose, feel the world as the wolf felt it. He reached for that connection now, pushed his consciousness toward Ghost's, felt resistance like pushing through deep water. Then he was four-legged. The world exploded with scent, horse sweat, leather, human anxiety, the underlying smell of his own body, which was not his body but Ghost's. He could hear things human ears missed, a rabbit moving in underbrush 100 yards away, wind through grass, the distant sound of water running. And south, there was something else. The scent of many humans, horses, smoke from cooking fires, a settlement, a castle, large enough to have stables, supplies, everything Jon needed. He pulled back into his own body, gasping. The warg sight faded, but the knowledge remained. There was a castle ahead, perhaps 10 miles. If he walked through the night, he could reach it by dawn. Jon unsaddled the roan and turned him loose. The horse would find water, graze, perhaps survive if no wolves or brigands found him first. It was the best Jon could do. He shouldered his pack and started walking. Ghost loped ahead, then circled back, then loped ahead again, the wolf's patience with human slowness evident, but not infinite. The road stretched endlessly. Jon's legs ached, his boots rubbed blisters on his heels, his shoulders burned from the pack's weight. He walked through sunset and into darkness, guided by starlight and the pale shape of Ghost moving ahead of him. Sometime after midnight he saw lights, torches burning on walls, the dark bulk of a castle against the sky. He approached cautiously, Ghost at his side. The castle was small but well-maintained, its walls intact, its gates closed for the night. A banner hung from the battlements, too dark to see clearly, but the shape was wrong for Lannister or Stark. Local lordling, probably, trying to stay neutral in a war that would not allow neutrality. Jon found a place in the tree line where he could see the gates, and settled down to wait for dawn. Ghost curled up beside him, the wolf's body warmth a comfort in the cold night air. He did not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the dream vision again. The twins, the screaming, the blood, his brother's scent mixed with pain and betrayal. He was running out of time. He could feel it like sand slipping through his fingers. Dawn came gray and cold. Jon stood stiffly, his muscles protesting, and approached the castle gates. A guard called down from the wall, voice thick with sleep. "Who goes there?" "A traveler," Jon called back. "I need to buy a horse." "I have silver." The guard peered down at him, then at Ghost. That's a big dog. He's a wolf. He won't hurt anyone unless I tell him to. The guard disappeared. Jon heard voices, argument, then the sound of bars being lifted. The gate opened a crack and a man emerged. Older, with sergeant's bearing and hard eyes that had seen violence. "Show me your silver," the sergeant said. Jon pulled out his purse and showed the contents. Not much left after buying horses and supplies along the way, but enough, he hoped, for one more mount. The sergeant counted the coins with his eyes, then nodded. "We've got horses. Lord's away fighting, but his steward has authority to sell. Come in. Leave the wolf outside. He stays with me," Jon said. "Then you can sleep in the yard," the sergeant replied. "Wolf that size isn't coming into my lord's hall. Take it or leave it." Jon took it. The alternative was walking another 50 miles to the twins. The castle's stablemaster was a squat man with horse shit on his boots, and no love for strangers. He showed Jon 3 horses, all old, all past their prime, all overpriced for what they were. But Jon had no room to negotiate. He chose the youngest looking of the 3, a bay mare with a white blaze, and paid what the stablemaster asked. "You're heading south," the stablemaster observed as Jon saddled the mare. "Toward the twins." Jon's hand stilled on the girth strap. "What of it?" "Nothing. Just that there's a wedding there today. Lord Edmure Tully and one of Lord Frey's daughters. Big feast, they say. Lots of wine. Lots of food." The stablemaster spat into the straw. "Course. The young wolf will be there too. King Robb, they call him now. Wonder how long he'll keep that crown." Jon's blood went cold. Today. The wedding was today. "How far to the twins?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. 50 miles as the raven flies. 60 by road. 2 days' ride for most folk. The stablemaster eyed Jon's face. "You look like you want to do it faster." "I do." "Then kill that mare doing it. She's got one good run left in her, maybe. After that," he shrugged. "After that, you're walking again." Jon led the mare out of the stable, Ghost following. The sun was fully up now, burning off the morning mist. He had lost 9 days getting here. 9 days of hard riding, wrong turns, delays, obstacles, and the wedding was today. He swung into the saddle and touched his heels to the mare's flanks. She started forward, not fast, but steady. Jon turned her south and let her pick up speed, moving from walk to trot to canter. 50 miles. If he rode dawn to dusk without stopping, if the mare held up, if the road stayed clear, he could reach the twins by nightfall. If he was lucky, if the gods were kind, if he was not already too late. Ghost ran beside him, the wolf's long strides eating up ground. The castle fell away behind them. The road stretched ahead, straight as a spear, leading toward the green fork and the 2 castles that spanned it, leading toward his brother, leading toward blood. Jon rode through the day in a haze of exhaustion and fear. The bay mare was stronger than she looked. She kept up a steady pace, her breathing even, her stride regular, but Jon could feel her tiring as the hours passed, the subtle signs of a horse reaching the end of her endurance. The landscape changed as he rode south. The burned villages and empty fields gave way to more populated land. Farms still worked, villages still standing. Lords who had survived the war by bending to whichever army passed through. The green fork appeared on his left, a wide gray ribbon of water flowing south. He was in the twins' territory now. Afternoon shadows lengthened. Jon passed a merchant's train heading north, the wagons laden with goods. The merchant stared at him, a lone rider pushing his horse too hard, a massive white wolf keeping pace beside him. Madman or messenger, their expressions said. Either way, not someone to interfere with. The sun was touching the horizon when Jon crested a low rise and saw them. The twins, 2 castles identical in size and shape, gray stone walls rising from the riverbanks on either side of the green fork. Between them, a bridge wide enough for 2 wagons abreast, the water tower visible halfway across. Banners flew from both castles, the blue and white towers of House Frey rippling in the wind. Smoke rose from cooking fires. Music drifted across the water, faint but unmistakable. The wedding feast had begun. Jon's heart clenched. He was here. He had made it. 50 miles, 60, 800 total from Castle Black, and he was here. But what now? He could not simply ride up to the gates and announce himself. He was a deserter from the Night's Watch, an oath-breaker, the bastard brother of the king in the north. Lord Walder Frey had no reason to welcome him, and every reason to throw him in a cell or send his head to the Lannisters. He needed to find a way inside. Needed to reach Robb without drawing attention to himself. Needed to warn his brother that something was wrong, that the dream vision Ghost had shown him meant danger, meant treachery, meant... Ghost suddenly went rigid beside him. The direwolf's hackles rose, his lips pulling back from his teeth. A growl built in his chest, so low Jon felt it more than heard it. Ghost's red eyes fixed on the eastern castle, the one where the feast was happening, where music played and men laughed and something was wrong. The wolf knew it. Jon could feel it through their bond. The wrongness, the stench of treachery that Ghost's nose could detect even from here. "I know," Jon murmured, his hand dropping to Longclaw's hilt. "I feel it too." He studied the castle, looking for weaknesses, ways in. The main gate was too obvious. The bridge was watched. But there, on the western bank, where the river ran close to the walls, there was a water gate. Barred, certainly, but perhaps not as heavily guarded as the main entrances. He turned the mare toward the river, moving off the road and into the sparse tree cover that lined the bank. Ghost followed, his body still tense, still radiating that low, constant warning. As they drew closer, Jon could hear the feast more clearly. Music, laughter, the sound of many people eating and drinking and celebrating. A wedding. Edmure Tully marrying Rosalind Frey, the research report had said. Cementing an alliance. Buying back Walder Frey's support after Robb had broken his marriage pact by wedding Jane Westerling instead. Politics, alliances. The games lords played while their people died. Jon found a place where the bank was low and dismounted. He tied the mare to a tree, though she was so exhausted she would probably not wander even if left loose. He took off his pack and his cloak, leaving himself in just his leather and his sword. "Stay here," he told Ghost. The direwolf growled, a sound of pure refusal. "I'm going into the river," Jon said. "I need to swim to the water gate." "You can't." Ghost's eyes burned into him. The wolf's body thrummed with tension, with the desperate need to protect, to fight, to be with his brother when danger came. Jon knelt and buried his face in Ghost's ruff. The fur was soft, warm, smelling of forest and wolf. "I'll come back," he whispered. "I promise. But I need you here. If something happens to me, you find Robb. You protect him. Understand?" Ghost whined, a sound so unlike him that Jon's chest tightened. "I have to do this," Jon said. "Stay." He stood and moved to the water's edge. The green fork was cold, the current strong. He waded in slowly, feeling the bottom drop away beneath his feet. When the water reached his chest, he pushed off and began swimming. The current pulled at him, trying to drag him downstream. Jon fought it, his strokes awkward with Longclaw strapped across his back. The sword's weight tried to pull him under. He kicked harder, his lungs burning, his muscles screaming. The water gate loomed ahead, a dark arch in the stone wall. Bars covered it, iron thick as a man's wrist. Jon grabbed them and hung there for a moment, catching his breath, his body shaking from cold and exertion. Through the bars, he could see a passage, dimly lit, a way into the castle. But the bars were solid, locked, impassable. Then he heard it, faint at first, then growing louder. Music changing. The song shifting to something else, something slower, something that made the hair on the back of Jon's neck stand up. The Rains of Castamere, the Lannister song, the song of House Lannister destroying House Rain, of Tywin Lannister's absolute merciless victory over those who defied him. Why were they playing a Lannister song at a Tully wedding? Jon's hands tightened on the bars. Through the water gate he heard other sounds now. Shouts, screams, steel on steel. The music faltered and died. No, he was too late. The trap had already sprung. He pulled at the bars with desperate strength, but they did not move. Could not move. He was on the wrong side of the wall, too late, too slow, and inside his brother was fighting for his life. A crossbow bolt struck the water next to Jon's head. He looked up. A guard stood on the wall above, reloading. "Intruder!" the guard shouted. In the river, more guards appeared. Jon let go of the bars and dove under the water, his lungs already burning, darkness closing in around him. He swam blind, underwater, letting the current carry him away from the castle. His chest was on fire. His vision narrowed to a point. He broke the surface, gasping. 20 yards downstream. Arrows hissed into the water around him. He dove again, swam hard, came up further away. The guards were still shooting, but the range was too great now, the darkness too deep. Jon dragged himself onto the bank, coughing water, his body shaking. Behind him, the twins burned with torchlight. Inside those walls, men were dying. His brother was dying, and Jon had failed. Ghost appeared from the darkness, the wolf's body slamming into Jon, knocking him down. The direwolf's tongue licked Jon's face, his neck, tasting for blood, checking for wounds. His whine was high and desperate, the sound of an animal in pain. Jon wrapped his arms around Ghost and held on while the world spun and his heart broke. He had ridden 800 miles, had deserted the Night's Watch, broken his oaths, sacrificed everything to get here in time, and he was too late. Jon did not know how long he lay there on the riverbank. Ghost pressed against him, the sounds of slaughter echoing from the castle. Eventually, the screaming stopped. The music did not resume. Only the occasional shout or clash of steel broke the silence, the mop-up work of men finishing off the wounded. Jon forced himself to sit up. His body felt like it was made of lead. Every muscle ached. His clothes were soaked, his sword harness chafing. But he was alive, unlike his brother. Unlike the 3,500 northern soldiers who had been camped outside the castle in feast tents, the Great Jon had been at the twins, according to what Jon had heard on the road. Small Jon Umber, Dacey Mormont, all the northern lords who had followed Robb south, who had crowned him king in the north, who had fought and bled and died for a 16-year-old boy's crown, gone. All of them, gone. Ghost's head lifted suddenly. His ears swiveled toward the river. Jon followed his gaze and saw movement on the water. A figure, swimming, struggling against the current. A man, armored, which was madness. Armored men sank like stones. Jon moved without thinking. He waded into the water, Ghost beside him, and grabbed the swimmer as the current brought him close. The man was heavy, his mail dragging him down, his breathing ragged. Jon hauled him toward shore, Ghost's teeth gripping the man's cloak, helping pull. They dragged him onto the bank and Jon rolled him over. The man was older, 50 or more, with a gray-shot beard and a face Jon did not recognize. But he wore the silver trout of House Tully on his chest, over mail that was crusted with blood. The man's eyes opened. They were blue, sharp despite his exhaustion. "Who?" he coughed, spat water. "Who are you?" "Jon Snow," Jon said. "Robb Stark's brother." The man's face twisted. "Then I'm sorry, boy. Your brother is dead. They killed him. Killed them all. The Freys and the Boltons. They killed them all." The words were like blows. Jon knew it already, had known it from the moment the music changed, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way it had not been before. "Who are you?" Jon managed. "Brynden Tully, the Blackfish." The man pushed himself up to sitting, wincing. "I stepped out to piss and came back to a slaughter, fought my way out." He looked at the castle, his face hard as stone. "Walder Frey will pay for this. By every god there is, he'll pay." "My brother," Jon's voice cracked. "Did you see him? Did you see what happened?" The Blackfish's expression softened slightly. "I saw him fall. Crossbow bolts, many of them. He died fighting. And then he stopped." "What?" Jon demanded. "Roose Bolton put a sword through his heart," said Jaime Lannister, sends his regards. The Blackfish spat. "Bolton's been working with the Lannisters. This whole thing, the wedding, the feast, it was a trap. Tywin Lannister's trap." Jon's hands were shaking. He balled them into fists to make them stop. "My mother, Catelyn. Was she dead?" The Blackfish said quietly. "She tried to bargain for the boy's life. Took one of Walder's grandsons hostage. But Frey didn't care. They killed her and threw her body in the river. The world seemed to tilt. Robb dead. Catelyn dead. 3,500 northern soldiers massacred at a wedding. The North's army destroyed in a single night of treachery. The war is over," Jon said. It came out flat, emotionless, because if he let himself feel, he would break apart. "The war is not over," the Blackfish replied. His voice was hard, uncompromising. "It's changed. That's all. The Boltons and the Freys think they've won. They think the North is broken. They're wrong." "How can you say that? Everyone is dead. Everyone who mattered." "Not everyone." The Blackfish grabbed Jon's shoulder, his grip painful. "Listen to me, boy. The Great Jon Umber is alive. They took him prisoner. He's worth more alive than dead. Magie Mormont and Galbart Glover weren't here. They're somewhere in the neck. Howland Reed never came south. Wyman Manderley stayed in White Harbor. The North has lords still, has armies still. Scattered armies, Jon said, leaderless. The king is dead. Then we make a new king. The Blackfish released him and stood, water streaming from his mail. Or we find the old king's heir. Who's left of House Stark? You. Your sisters, where are they? Sansa is in King's Landing. Arya, I don't know. She was traveling south with my father. After he died. Jon shook his head. I don't know where she is. And your younger brothers? Bran and Rickon? Dead. Theon Greyjoy killed them when he took Winterfell. The words tasted like ash. The Blackfish was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at Jon with those sharp blue eyes. That makes you the king in the north, Jon Snow. Jon barked a laugh, bitter and broken. I'm a bastard. I'm a deserter from the Night's Watch. I'm nobody. You're Eddard Stark's son. You're Robb Stark's brother. You're the last trueborn Stark male. I'm not trueborn. I'm a bastard. Then we'll legitimize you. Kings can do that. We'll find Robb's will, see who he named as heir, but if it's not you, then it should be. The Blackfish moved closer, his presence intense. The North needs a Stark. The Bannermen need someone to rally behind. You're here. You're alive. That's what matters. Jon's mind was reeling. King in the North. The title his brother had worn, the crown that had cost Robb everything. And the Blackfish wanted Jon to take it? Jon, who had broken his vows, who had failed to save his brother, who was nothing but a bastard trying to be something he was not. I can't, Jon said. I'm sworn to the Night's Watch. I already broke my oath coming here. If I claim a crown, If you don't claim the crown, the North falls to Bolton and Frey, the Blackfish interrupted. Is that what you want? Roose Bolton wearing a crown in Winterfell? The man who murdered your brother? The image made Jon's stomach turn. But the alternative, becoming king, leading armies, making decisions that would send men to their deaths, that was equally impossible. I need time, Jon said, to think. A howl cut through the night. Not Ghost. The direwolf stood at Jon's side, silent as always. This came from the castle, from the kennels. Another direwolf's howl. Anguished. Dying. Grey Wind. Jon's hand went to Longclaw's hilt. Robb's wolf. They're killing Robb's wolf. The Blackfish's face was grim. They'll mount its head on Robb's body. Make a mockery of the young wolf. That's how men like Walder Frey think. Rage flooded through Jon, hot and pure and absolute. They had killed his brother. Killed his mother. Killed 3,000 loyal men. And now they were desecrating Robb's body, killing his wolf, laughing about their treachery while northern blood cooled on their floors. He started walking toward the castle. Ghost moved with him, the direwolf's body tense. What are you doing? The Blackfish called. I'm going to kill Walder Frey, Jon said. His voice was calm, distant, the voice of a man who had moved beyond fear into something colder and more dangerous. You'll die. Probably. Jon kept walking. But Grey Wind won't die alone, and Walder Frey will learn that killing Starks has consequences. The Blackfish caught up with him, grabbed his arm. Listen to me. Revenge is a luxury. The North needs you alive more than it needs Walder Frey dead. The North needs someone who won't let this stand, Jon replied. Someone who'll make them pay. Then, make them pay smart. The Blackfish's grip tightened. Not by throwing your life away in a suicidal attack. By gathering the scattered northern forces, by retaking Winterfell, by becoming the king your brother was trying to be before they murdered him. Jon stopped walking, turned to face the older man. You really think I could do that? Be what Robb was? I think you're here when you should be at the wall, the Blackfish said. I think you rode 800 miles to save your brother. I think you have a direwolf and a Valyrian steel sword, and the Stark name. And I think the North needs hope more than it needs another dead boy. The howling from the castle had stopped. Grey Wind was dead. Robb's wolf, his companion since puppyhood, the creature that had tried to warn him about the trap and been locked away for his trouble. Gone. Jon looked at the twins, at the torches burning on the walls, at the banners of the houses that had conspired to destroy his family. Frey and Bolton, Lannister gold behind it all. I'll need help, Jon said quietly. I don't know how to be a king. I don't know how to lead armies, or make alliances, or do any of the things Robb did. Robb didn't know either when he started, the Blackfish replied. He learned. You'll learn. And you'll have help. The northern lords who survived will rally to you. Howland Reed, Wyman, Manderley, the mountain clans. We'll find them. We'll rebuild. And then? Then we take back the north. And then, the Blackfish's smile was cold as winter. Then we teach the Lannisters and the Freys and the Boltons what the words the North remembers really mean. Jon looked down at Ghost. The direwolf stared back at him, red eyes glowing in the darkness. Through their bond, Jon felt the wolf's certainty. Ghost knew what needed to be done, knew that they could not go back to the wall, could not return to the life they had left behind. The choice had been made the moment Jon rode south. I'm a deserter, Jon said one more time. The Night's Watch will hunt me. Let them try, the Blackfish said. You'll be the king in the north. You'll have armies of your own. King in the north. The title settled over Jon like a cloak made of lead. He had never wanted this. Had spent his whole life knowing he was a bastard, that he would never have lands or titles or power. He had joined the Night's Watch to find purpose, to serve something greater than himself. And now the watch was behind him. His brother was dead, and the north was broken. All that was left was this: vengeance, duty, the terrible weight of being the last Stark who could pick up the crown his brother had died wearing. I'll need to see him, Jon said. Robb, I need to see my brother's body. They won't let you take it, the Blackfish warned. They'll have it displayed. A warning to anyone who thinks about rebellion. I don't care, Jon's voice was hard. I need to see him. To say goodbye, then, he took a breath. Then I'll be what you want me to be. What the North needs, the Blackfish nodded slowly. Then we wait for dawn. When the Freys and Boltons celebrate their victory, we'll slip into the camp. Find your brother. And then we ride north, to gather what's left of our forces. They moved back from the river, finding shelter in a copse of trees where they could watch the castle without being seen. Jon sat with his back against a tree, Ghost pressed against his side. The Blackfish sat nearby, cleaning his sword with methodical patience. Tell me about the battle, Jon said. Everything. I need to know what happened. The Blackfish told him. The wedding, the feast, the music changing to the Rains of Castamere. The doors barring, the crossbowmen in the gallery, the slaughter that followed. Robb shot with bolts, Catelyn grabbing Jingle Bell as a hostage, Roose Bolton's betrayal, the northern army outside, trapped in their tents, cut down by Frey and Bolton men who had pretended to be allies. Jon listened to every word, committing it to memory, names, details, the sequence of events. Who had died, who had been captured, who had escaped. He would need this information. Would need to know who could be trusted and who had shown their true colors in blood. When the Blackfish finished, Jon asked, why did Robb go to the twins? Didn't he know it was dangerous? He knew, but he needed the Freys back. His army was down to 3,500 men. He'd lost the Karstarks after executing Lord Rickard, lost men to battles and desertion. The Ironborn held the north, the Lannisters held the south. He was cornered. The Blackfish's voice was bitter. This wedding was supposed to be his way out, cementing the alliance with the Freys and Tullys, planning to retake the north starting with Moat Catelyn. He had a strategy. It would have worked if Walder Frey hadn't sold him to the Lannisters, Jon finished. Tywin Lannister promised Frey and Bolton everything they wanted. The north for Bolton, River Run for Frey. Royal pardons, gold. All they had to do was murder a 16-year-old boy at a wedding. The Blackfish spat. There's a special place in the Seven Hells for men who violate guest right. They'll burn for this. Not if I burn them first, Jon said quietly. Dawn came slow and gray. Jon stood, his body stiff from the cold ground. Ghost rose with him, stretching, shaking out his white fur. The direwolf's eyes were fixed on the castle, on the place where his brother Wolf had died. Ready? The Blackfish asked. Jon nodded. He was not ready, would never be ready for what he was about to see. But he had to do it anyway. Had to see his brother's body. Had to know for certain that Robb was truly gone. Had to say the goodbye he had ridden 800 miles to give. They moved through the morning mist toward the twins, 2 men and a wolf. walking toward the aftermath of a massacre that would echo through the Seven Kingdoms for generations. Walking toward the moment when Jon Snow, bastard of Winterfell, would become something else entirely. The camps outside the eastern castle were charnel houses. Jon moved through them in the gray dawn light, Ghost at his side, the Blackfish a silent presence behind him. The feast tents that had housed 3,500 northern soldiers were now open-air graves. Bodies lay everywhere, in the mud, in the ashes of cooking fires, sprawled across overturned tables where men had been eating and drinking when the killing began. Most wore no armor. They had been at a wedding feast, celebrating an alliance, drinking Frey wine, and eating Frey food. They had not expected to fight, had not expected to die. Jon's boots squelched in mud that was more blood than water. His hand rested on Longclaw's hilt, not because he expected attack, but because he needed something solid to hold on to. Ghost moved ahead, the direwolf's nose low to the ground, tracking scents through the carnage. The bodies wore the colors of every northern house that had followed Robb south. Jon recognized sigils even on corpses, the battle axe of Serwyn, the pine trees of Tallheart, the black crowns of Dustin. Lords and common soldiers alike, all dead, all betrayed by the same treachery. They didn't even fight back, Jon said. His voice sounded distant, hollow. Look at them, no weapons drawn. They were slaughtered like sheep, the Blackfish finished grimly. That was the point. Make it absolute. Leave no one alive to rally the North. But they had made mistakes. The Blackfish had escaped. The great Jon Umber had been taken alive. Jon had seen him on the road, heard tales of how it took 8 men to subdue the massive northerner even when he was half drunk. Mage Mormont and Galbart Glover were somewhere in the neck, sent by Robb to coordinate with Howland Reed for the planned attack on Moat Cailin. Not everyone was dead. Not yet. Jon stopped at the largest tent, the one that had housed the Northern Command. Bodies lay thick here, men who had been closest to Robb, who had served as his guards and advisors. Jon recognized Sir Wendell Manderley, Lord Wyman's son, his throat cut, his eyes staring at nothing. Beside him lay Donal Locke and Owen Norrie, both with crossbow bolts in their backs. And there, near the tent's center, lay a woman, Daisy Mormont. She wore mail and leather, her long hair matted with blood. An axe had taken her in the side, a killing blow from someone much larger and stronger. Her hand still gripped her sword, fingers locked around the hilt even in death. Jon knelt beside her. He had met Daisy once, years ago when she had visited Winterfell with her mother. She had been fierce and laughing, as strong as many men, with her mother's pride and her people's iron loyalty. She had fought at the Whispering Wood, at Oxacross, in every battle of Robb's campaign, and she had died at a wedding, cut down by Sir Ryman Frey's axe while trying to escape the slaughter. She deserved better, Jon said quietly. They all deserved better, the Blackfish replied. But deserving and getting are different things. Come, we need to move before the Freys start their patrols. They moved deeper into the camp, Ghost ranging ahead, alert for guards, but the Freys seemed content to let the dead lie where they had fallen. No patrols walked the blood-soaked ground. No one came to collect the bodies for burial. Why would they? These were enemies. Traitors to the throne, in the Freys' eyes. Men who had followed a rebel king and paid the price. Jon's jaw clenched. Rebel king. Robb had been 16 years old, a boy thrust into leadership by his father's execution, trying to avenge Ned Stark's murder, trying to protect the North. He had made mistakes, marrying Jane Westerling, executing Lord Rickard Karstark, but his cause had been just. His cause had been honor, and honor had gotten him killed, just like it had killed their father. Ghost stopped suddenly, his body going rigid. The direwolf's nose pointed toward the bridge, toward the water tower that sat at its midpoint. A growl built in his chest, low and continuous. Jon followed his gaze and saw it, a body hanging from the water tower's battlements. Too distant to see clearly, but Jon knew. He knew. That's him, he said. His voice did not shake, did not break. It came out flat, dead, because if he let himself feel, he would collapse. Aye, the Blackfish said quietly. They've displayed him. Warning to anyone who thinks about continuing the rebellion. Jon started walking toward the bridge. The Blackfish grabbed his arm. It's guarded. We can't. I'm going to see my brother, Jon said. He pulled free and kept walking, his hand on Longclaw's hilt now, ready to draw if anyone tried to stop him. Ghost moved with him, the direwolf's massive body a white shadow in the gray morning. They crossed the blood-soaked ground between the camps and the bridge, passing more bodies, more evidence of the massacre. 2 Frey guards stood at the bridge's eastern end. They saw Jon approaching and lowered their spears, faces hard. "No one crosses. Lord Frey's orders." Jon did not slow. "I'm crossing. You deaf boy?" I said. Ghost's growl stopped the guard mid-sentence. The direwolf stepped forward, lips pulled back from teeth the size of daggers, red eyes burning with predator focus. He was nearly as large as the guards' horses, and infinitely more dangerous. The guards went pale. One started to raise his spear, then thought better of it. That's a direwolf." "Yes," Jon said, "and if you don't move, he'll tear your throat out." "Your choice." The guards looked at each other, looked at Ghost, looked at Jon, who stood with his hand on a sword that was clearly too fine for a common soldier, with a face that carried the Stark features clear as a banner. They moved aside. Jon walked onto the bridge, Ghost and the Blackfish following. His boots struck stone, the sound echoing off the water below. The green fork flowed dark and swift beneath him, carrying away the blood that had been thrown into it the night before. Catelyn's body was down there somewhere, drifting toward the sea, her throat cut. Her dreams of protecting her children ended in violence and betrayal. The water tower loomed ahead. Jon looked up and saw what they had done to his brother. Robb's body hung from the battlements, arms spread, displayed like a grotesque banner. His head was gone, replaced by Grey Wind's head, sewn onto his shoulders in mockery of the young wolf title. The direwolf's mouth was frozen in a snarl, eyes closed, gray fur matted with dried blood. They had dressed him in his crown. The simple bronze circlet Robb had worn as king in the north sat on Grey Wind's head, a final insult. Jon's vision blurred. He blinked hard, forcing clarity. He would not look away, would not let them rob him of this moment, this last sight of his brother. Robb's body was riddled with crossbow bolts. Jon counted them. 5, 6, 7, visible from this angle. More, probably, in his back. They had shot him like a deer, like prey, and he had died knowing his bannermen were being slaughtered around him, knowing his mother was screaming, knowing the alliance he had bought with a wedding had been a lie. "The Northern Rebellion, 298-299 AC, a voice said from above. "Short-lived, wasn't it?" Jon looked up. A man stood on the water tower's wall, old and stooped, with watery eyes and a spotted scalp beneath wisps of white hair. He wore rich robes, the twin towers of Frey prominent on his chest. Walder Frey, the late Lord Frey, the man who had orchestrated this massacre. "You look like him," Walder Frey continued, peering down at Jon. "The young wolf. You his brother? Another pup come to die?" Jon's hand tightened on Longclaw's hilt until his knuckles went white. Every fiber of his being wanted to draw the blade, to climb the tower, to bury Valyrian steel in this old man's throat. Guest right be damned. Honor be damned. This man had murdered his family. The Blackfish's hand landed on Jon's shoulder, heavy warning. "Not here. Not now. Listen to the Blackfish," Walder Frey cackled. "He's got sense, that one. Ran like a rabbit when the killing started. Smart. You should do the same, boy. Run south, run north, run wherever you like. The north belongs to the Boltons now. The Starks are done. The Starks are not done," Jon said. His voice came out low, dangerous, nothing like the boy who had left Winterfell for the Wall. "And you will pay for what you did here. I swear it, by the old gods and the new. You will pay." Walder Frey laughed, a wheezing sound, oaths from a Stark pup. "I'm terrified. Now get off my bridge before I have my men put you down like the dog you are." More guards were appearing now, drawn by the confrontation. A dozen men with spears and crossbows, spreading out to cut off Jon's escape. The Blackfish tensed, hand on his sword. "We need to leave," he murmured. "Now." Jon looked up at Robb's body one more time. His brother. His king. The boy who had been his closest friend, who had trained beside him, and laughed with him, and dreamed with him of a future that would never come. "I'm sorry," Jon whispered, too quiet for anyone but Ghost to hear. "I tried. I rode as fast as I could. I'm sorry I wasn't fast enough." Then he turned and walked back across the bridge, Ghost at his side, the Blackfish covering their retreat. The Frey guards let them go, more interested in mocking than fighting. Their laughter followed Jon all the way to the eastern shore, They rode north in silence. The Blackfish had found horses in the chaos, stolen from the Frey stables, taken as first payment for the debt that would someday come due. Jon rode a black courser that was too fine for him, Ghost loping tirelessly beside them. They left the twins behind, left the bodies and the betrayal and the failure. Jon had not spoken since leaving the bridge, could not speak. Every time he tried, he saw Robb's body hanging from the battlements, saw Grey Wind's head sewn onto his shoulders, saw the mockery the Freys had made of his brother's death. The Blackfish seemed to understand. He rode without questions, without demands, giving Jon the silence he needed to process what he had seen. They rode through farmland gone to seed, through villages empty or destroyed, through a riverlands that had been bled white by 2 years of war. Lannister and Stark, Baratheon and Greyjoy, all of them fighting over kingdoms and crowns while the small folk starved and died. And for what? Robb was dead. Stannis was defeated. Renly was murdered. Balon Greyjoy sat on his salt throne and raided the coast. Joffrey Baratheon, bastard born of incest, crowned through treachery, sat the Iron Throne with Tywin Lannister pulling his strings. The Game of Thrones had devoured everyone who played it. On the second day north of the twins, they stopped at an abandoned sept. The building was half burned, its roof gone, but the walls still stood, and it offered shelter from the wind. Jon dismounted stiffly, his legs aching from hours in the saddle. The Blackfish started a small fire in the sept's ruined altar. Sacrilege, probably. But the gods had not stopped the Red Wedding. The gods had not saved Robb or Catelyn or 3,500 loyal men. If the gods took offense at a cooking fire in their broken house, they could strike him down. They ate in silence, dried meat and hard bread, washed down with water from a nearby stream. Ghost lay by the fire, the direwolf's eyes reflecting the flames. He had been subdued since the twins, as if he too felt the loss of Grey Wind, the brother wolf who had grown up beside him in Winterfell's Godswood. "We need to talk about what comes next," the Blackfish said finally. Jon looked at him across the fire. "What is there to talk about? The North is broken. The king is dead. The Boltons and Freys have won. The battle is lost," the Blackfish corrected. "Not the war. The North still has lords, still has armies. They need someone to lead them." "Then find someone," Jon said. "Find someone who knows how to lead. Someone who isn't a 16-year-old bastard who deserted the Night's Watch." "I'm looking at him." Jon laughed bitterly. "You're looking at a failure. I rode 800 miles to save my brother and got there too late. I couldn't even get into the castle. Couldn't do anything but watch them hang his body like a trophy." "You tried," the Blackfish said. "That's more than most men would do. You broke your vows, deserted the Watch, rode through war-torn country alone because you thought your brother needed you. That's courage, Jon Snow. That's what the North needs. The North needs a king who won't get his people killed," Jon replied. "Robb was brave and honorable, and he led his army straight into a massacre. I'd do the same thing. I'm too much like him, too much like father. Honor will get me killed just like it killed them." The Blackfish studied him for a long moment. "You know what's different about you?" "What? You know honor will get you killed? Your father didn't. Robb didn't. They believed that doing the right thing would be enough, that justice and mercy and keeping oaths mattered more than victory." The Blackfish leaned forward. "But you've seen what happens when honor meets cruelty. You've lived at the Wall, where survival matters more than nobility. You're not your father or your brother. You're something else. Something harder." "I'm a deserter," Jon said flatly. "You're a man who chose family over duty when it mattered. That's human, not dishonorable." The Blackfish poked at the fire with a stick. "The Night's Watch will want your head." "Fine, we'll deal with that when it comes. But right now, the North needs you more than the Wall does." Jon was quiet. Part of him wanted to believe it, wanted to think he could be what the Blackfish said, but a larger part remembered standing outside the Watergate. Too late, too slow, useless, while his brother died. "Tell me about the Northern Lords," Jon said finally. "Who's left? Who can we trust?" The Blackfish's expression shifted to something more businesslike. "The great Jon Umber is alive, held prisoner at the Twins. He's worth more to the Freys as a hostage than a corpse. His uncles, Hodor Horsebane and Mors Crowfoot, will be split. One will bend to the Boltons to free the Great Jon. The other will fight. Which is which? Can't say for certain. But Mors is the fiercer. My guess is he'll fight. Jon nodded. Who else? Mage Mormont and Galbart Glover are somewhere in the neck. Robb sent them to coordinate with Howland Reed for an attack on Moat Catelyn. If they're alive, they're powerful allies. The Blackfish counted on his fingers. Howland Reed himself is at Greywater Watch. He never brought his forces south. Said the Crannogmen don't fight in foreign wars. But he was Ned Stark's friend. He might fight for Ned's son. The Crannogmen helped me through the neck, Jon said. One of them, anyway. Recognized Ghost. Said Lord Reed would want them to help. Good. That's good. The Blackfish continued. Lord Wyman Manderley of White Harbor is the wealthiest northern lord, commands 8,000 to 12,000 men potentially, and has a fleet hidden up the White Knife. His son Wendell died at the Red Wedding. Manderley will want revenge. Jon thought of the body he had seen in the camp. Throat cut, eyes staring. I saw Wendell's body. Then, when we reach Manderley, tell him how his son died. Tell him the Freys murdered him at a wedding. Light that fire and watch it burn. The Blackfish's smile was cold. Manderley plays at being fat and foolish. But he's cunning. He'll bide his time, pretend to submit to Bolton, then strike when it hurts most. Who else? The mountain clans. Wool, Nori, Flint. They're fierce, loyal to the Starks down to their bones. They'll follow you if you can reach them. The Blackfish paused, and there's one more possibility. Stannis Baratheon. Jon's head snapped up. Stannis? He's broken after the Blackwater, down to 1,500 or 2,000 men. But he has Melisandre, his Red Priestess, and she's convinced him he's the chosen one or some such. Word is the Night's Watch sent him a letter begging for help against the wildlings. The Blackfish met Jon's eyes. If Stannis comes north, if he lands at Eastwatch or the Shadow Tower, he'll need northern support, and he can legitimize bastards. Make you Jon Stark instead of Jon Snow. The idea sent a strange thrill through Jon. Jon Stark, not a bastard, not a Snow, a true son of Winterfell, legitimate and acknowledged. But the price would be serving Stannis Baratheon, bending the knee to a southern king. And Stannis would want the North's loyalty, its armies, its resources. He would want Jon to fight his war for the Iron Throne. One problem at a time, Jon said. First we need to retake the North from the Boltons. Then we worry about kings and crowns. Smart, the Blackfish approved. So what's the plan? Where do we go first? Jon thought. The North was vast, as large as the other 6 kingdoms combined. Winterfell was the heart, but the Boltons held it now, or would soon. The Dreadfort was Roose Bolton's seat, impregnable, full of Bolton men who had betrayed Robb. Moat Catelyn was held by the Ironborn. But there were other places, other strongholds. White Harbor, Jon said. We go to Lord Wyman Manderley first. He has the men and the gold. If we can secure his support, we have a chance. White Harbor is 600 miles north, the Blackfish said. Through country the Boltons control. We'll need to move carefully, avoid their patrols. We've made it this far, Jon replied. He looked at Ghost. The direwolf's red eyes glowed in the firelight, patient and eternal. And we have an advantage. The Boltons don't. What's that? The North remembers. Jon's voice hardened. Every lord who bent the knee to Robb, every soldier who followed him south, every small folk who called him king, they'll remember what the Boltons and Freys did. They'll remember the Red Wedding. And when we raise our banners, they'll come. The Blackfish smiled grimly. The young wolf is dead. Long live the White Wolf. Jon flinched at the title. He was not a wolf. He was just Jon. A bastard who had tried to save his brother and failed. But as he looked at Ghost, at the massive direwolf who had crossed 800 miles of dangerous country without complaint, who had stood beside him through everything, who was now the last living direwolf south of the Wall, he felt something shift inside him. Grey Wind was dead. Robb was dead. The pack had been broken, but Jon and Ghost remained, and broken things could be remade. Stronger. Harder. Forged in blood and grief into something that would make the Boltons and Freys regret the day they betrayed House Stark. The White Wolf, Jon repeated quietly. All right, if that's what they want to call me, let them. But I'm not doing this for glory or crowns. I'm doing it for Robb, for Father, for every person who died at the Twins because they trusted in honor and guest. Right, revenge is a fine motivator, the Blackfish said. But it's not enough to sustain you. You need something more. "What is it you want, Jon Snow? Really want?" Jon was quiet for a long time, watching the flames dance. What did he want? He had wanted to save Robb, and failed. He had wanted to serve at the Wall, and abandoned it. He had wanted to be someone other than a bastard, and that dream had died with his brother. What was left? "I want the North safe," he said finally. "I want Winterfell back in Stark hands. I want the Boltons and Freys to pay for what they did. And I want—" He stopped. "What?" the Blackfish pressed. "I want my sisters home," Jon whispered. "Sansa is in King's Landing, a hostage to the Lannisters. Arya is God's nowhere, probably dead. But if there's any chance they're alive, any chance I can get them back." He did not finish. Could not finish. The thought of Sansa, gentle and proper, trapped in the viper's nest of King's Landing. The thought of Arya, wild and fierce, alone in a world that would break her or kill her. They were his pack, his blood. And he had failed to protect them, just as he had failed to protect Robb. "Then we fight for them too," the Blackfish said. "We take back the North. We make alliances. We get strong enough that the Lannisters have to negotiate, and we bring your sisters home." It sounded impossible. But then, so had riding 800 miles from Castle Black to the Twins. So had crossing the Neck. So had surviving this long in a world that wanted him dead. "All right," Jon said. He stood, ghost rising with him. "We ride for White Harbor at dawn. We find Manderley. We start building an army." "And the Night's Watch?" the Blackfish asked. "When they come for you." Jon thought of Castle Black, of the vows he had sworn, of the men he had called brothers. Pip and Gren would have given his letter to Maester Aemon by now. The Watch would know he had deserted. They would declare him an oathbreaker, an outlaw. They would hunt him if they could. But the Watch was undermanned, underfunded, facing wildling armies beyond the Wall. They had bigger concerns than one deserter, even if he was claiming a crown. "If they come for me, I'll face them," Jon said. "I'll tell them why I left. I'll offer to return when the North is secured, when my family is safe. And if they won't accept that," he shrugged, "then I die an oathbreaker. I've made my choice. I'll live with it." The Blackfish nodded, satisfied. "Get some sleep. We have a long road ahead." Jon lay down near the fire, ghost curled against him for warmth. The direwolf's breathing was slow and steady, a rhythm Jon matched unconsciously. Above them, the Sept's broken roof revealed a sky full of stars. Somewhere up there, Jon thought, Robb was watching, father too. Maybe even mother, though Catelyn Stark had never looked at Jon with anything but coldness. They were all gone now, all the people who had shaped his life. He was alone, a deserter, a bastard, a failed savior. But he was alive. And he had Ghost. And he had a purpose now, forged in the ruins of the Red Wedding. He would take back the North, would make the Boltons and Freys pay, would find his sisters and bring them home. Or he would die trying. Either way, the world would remember that the Starks were not done. That winter was coming. And that the White Wolf did not forgive. They rode through the Neck again, guided this time by a different Crannog man who appeared from the swamps like morning mist. Word had spread through the bog. The young wolf was dead. But his brother lived, and the Crannogmen remembered their debt to Ned Stark. The journey north took 12 days. They avoided the King's Road, traveling through forest and swamp, sleeping rough, eating whatever Ghost could catch. The Blackfish proved to be good company, despite his grimness. He had fought in Robert's rebellion, had seen the realm torn apart once before, and his experience gave Jon something to learn from. They talked strategy, tactics, the ways to fight when outnumbered and outgunned. The Blackfish taught Jon that war was not about glory or honor, but about making the enemy pay more than they wanted to for every inch of ground. Robb won every battle, the Blackfish said one night. Every single one. Whispering Wood, Battle of the Camps, Oxcross. The boy was a tactical genius, but he lost the war because he didn't understand that battles and wars are different things. Wars are won politically, by making alliances, by keeping your word, by understanding that sometimes you have to sacrifice what you want for what you need. He sacrificed his marriage for honor, Jon said, married Jane Westerling because he slept with her and his honor demanded it. Aye, and that honor cost him the Freys, cost him half his army, cost him the war. The Blackfish's voice was sad. I loved the boy, but he was too much like Ned, too good for the world they were born into. Jon thought about that, about his father beheaded for trying to protect children, about Robb, murdered for trying to keep his honor intact, about himself, a deserter from the Night's Watch because he had chosen family over duty. Maybe honor was overrated. Maybe survival mattered more. Teach me, Jon said. Teach me how to win wars, not just battles. Teach me to be what Robb couldn't. The Blackfish smiled. Now you're thinking like a king. They crossed out of the neck on the 13th day and entered the north proper. The land here was different. Colder, harsher. The trees thick with snow even though it was only early autumn. Winter was coming. The maesters said it would be a long one. Years, maybe. The kind of winter that killed thousands and reshaped kingdoms. Jon felt it in his bones. Felt the cold settling in. The certainty that the easy times were ending. The North would need to be strong to survive what was coming. Strong and united and led by someone who understood that wars were won with blood and guile, not just courage. On the 15th day north of the Twins, they saw White Harbor in the distance. The city rose from the coast like a crown of stone and timber, its walls massive, its harbor filled with ships. This was the North's greatest city, its richest port, the seat of House Manderly who had fled here from the Reach 1,000 years ago, and made themselves northern down to their bones. Lord Wyman Manderly would be grieving his son, would be angry at the Freys and Boltons, would be looking for a way to strike back. Jon had to convince him that a bastard boy and a direwolf were that way. They approached the gates as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the cobblestones. Guards stood at attention, wearing the merman sigil of House Manderly. They watched Jon and the Blackfish approach, hands on spear hafts, eyes wary. "Who goes there?" the sergeant called. Jon reined in his horse. This was the moment. The first test. He could claim to be a wanderer, a refugee, anything but what he was. Or he could tell the truth and hope it did not get him killed. He touched Ghost's head, drawing strength from the wolf's presence. Then he called back, voice steady. "Jon Snow, son of Eddard Stark, I've come to speak with Lord Manderly about the Red Wedding and the future of the North." The guards went still. Then the sergeant said, "Wait here." He disappeared through the gate. Jon sat on his horse and waited. Ghost pressed against his leg, the Blackfish silent beside him. Minutes passed. The sun continued its descent, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. Finally, the gates opened wide. The sergeant emerged with a dozen men in full armor, bearing torches. Behind them walked a man so fat he waddled. Lord Wyman Manderly himself, his face red, his breathing labored, his eyes sharp despite his bulk. "Jon Snow," Manderly wheezed. "Ned Stark's bastard. I heard you'd gone to the wall." "I did, my lord," Jon said. "And then I left it to try to save my brother. I was too late." "Aye, you were too late. We were all too late." Manderly's face twisted with grief and rage. "My son Wendell is dead, murdered at a wedding by Frey treachery. The young wolf is dead. The North is broken. And you come here seeking what? Shelter? Gold? An army?" "All three, my lord," Jon said honestly. "The Boltons and Freys think they've won. They think the North will submit. They're wrong. I'm going to take back Winterfell, retake the North, and make them pay for every drop of Stark blood they spilled. I'm asking you to help me do it." Manderly stared at him for a long moment. Then he started laughing, a wheezing, painful sound that shook his massive frame. "A bastard boy, a deserter from the Night's Watch, asking me to commit treason against the crown for a lost cause." Jon's jaw clenched. "Yes, my lord. And you have what? A direwolf and the Blackfish?" Manderly shook his head. "Boy, the Boltons have Winterfell. The Freys have the Twins. The Lannisters have the Iron Throne. What makes you think you can stand against all of them?" "Because the North remembers," Jon said. His voice rang out clear and hard in the evening air. "Every man who followed Robb south remembers. Every house that lost sons at the Red Wedding remembers. The small folk remember. And when I raise the Stark banner, when I march on Winterfell, they will come. Because the North does not forget, and the North does not forgive." Silence fell. Manderly studied Jon with those sharp eyes, seeing past the bastard boy to something else. The determination, the rage, the cold certainty that this was not a lost cause, but a war that had just begun. Finally, Manderly said, "The North remembers." "Aye, we remember. Come inside, Jon Snow. We have much to discuss." The gates of White Harbor swung open wide. Jon rode through, Ghost at his side, the Blackfish following. Behind them, the sun set on the day, and ahead, in the city's heart, the war for the North began. Not with armies or sieges, but with words spoken in a lord's hall, with plans laid by candlelight, with oaths sworn on northern steel and northern pride. The Red Wedding had broken the North. But the North would rise again, harder, colder, angrier. And when it did, the Boltons and Freys and Lannisters would learn that winter had come for them at last. Jon Snow, the White Wolf, had come home. Epilogue. The king in the north 3 months later, Jon stood on Winterfell's walls and looked out at the army gathered below. 10,000 men, maybe more. They had come from all over the north, from Bear Island and Last Hearth, from White Harbor and the mountain holdfasts, from places so remote they had no names on southern maps. They had come because Jon had called them, because the Stark banners flew again over Winterfell, because the White Wolf had retaken his home. The siege had taken 6 weeks. The Boltons had fought hard, but they had been outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Roose Bolton had died with Jon's sword through his heart, his last words a curse that Jon did not remember. Ramsay Bolton had tried to flee and been caught by Ghost, who had torn his throat out before Jon could even give the order. Winterfell was home again. Stark home. Jon's home. Lord Wyman Manderley had provided the gold and the initial troops. Howland Reed had brought the Crannog men from the swamps. Moore's Crowfoot Umber had rallied the eastern houses. The mountain clans had descended from their holdfasts with axes and spears, and the ancient loyalty of men who had followed Starks for 8,000 years. And Jon had led them, not with his father's honor or his brother's courage, but with something colder and harder, the understanding that this was war, and war was won by those willing to do whatever it took. He had burned Frey envoys who came demanding his surrender, had executed Bolton collaborators in Winterfell's courtyard, had sent Ghost into battle at the Dreadfort, where the direwolf had killed a dozen men before the gates fell. He had become what the North needed, what Robb had never been willing to become. A king who understood that mercy was a luxury and survival was everything. The Blackfish appeared at his side, older and grayer, but still unbowed. The lords are gathering in the Great Hall. They want to crown you. Jon did not answer immediately. He looked out at the assembled army, at the banners of every northern house that had sworn to him, at the White Wolf banner that flew beside the Stark direwolf, his personal sigil given to him by Lord Manderley after the siege. "I'm a bastard," Jon said. "A deserter. An oath-breaker. Why would they crown me?" "Because you won," the Blackfish replied simply. "Because you retook Winterfell. Because you're Ned Stark's son, and Robb Stark's brother, and the only person who gave them something to fight for after the Red Wedding." He paused. "And because Stannis Baratheon sent a letter offering to legitimize you, Jon Stark, Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North. All you have to do is bend the knee." Jon's jaw clenched. Stannis had landed at Eastwatch by the Sea 2 months ago with his surviving forces. The Night's Watch had begged him for help against Mance Rayder's wildling army, but Stannis had seen opportunity. The North was in chaos, ripe for conquest. If he could secure northern support, he could rebuild his army, march south, take the Iron Throne, and all it would cost was Jon's independence. "What did you tell him?" Jon asked. "I told him you would consider it," the Blackfish said. "But between you and me, tell him to shove his offer up his ass. The North didn't fight this hard to free itself from the Boltons just to bend to another southern king." Jon almost smiled. "What about the Night's Watch? They sent men demanding I return to face justice for desertion. We sent them back with a message. The North needs you more than the Wall does. If they want your head, they can come take it. But they'd have to go through 10,000 Northmen first." The Blackfish's expression was grim. "They won't come. They have wildlings to fight and winters to survive. One deserter, even a king, isn't worth the resources." Jon nodded slowly. Everything was coming together, all the pieces clicking into place. He had an army. He had Winterfell. He had the Northern Lords' support, or at least their pragmatic acceptance that he was better than the alternatives. All he needed now was the crown. "What about my sisters?" Jon asked quietly. "Sansa and Arya? No word on Arya? She vanished after your father's execution. Could be dead, could be hiding." The Blackfish's voice softened slightly. "But Sansa is definitely in King's Landing. Married to Tyrion Lannister now. The imp. Tywin's using her as a hostage to keep the North in line. Jon's hands clenched into fists. Sansa. Sweet, gentle Sansa, who had dreamed of southern knights and beautiful princes. Trapped in King's Landing, married to a Lannister, a pawn in Tywin's games. We'll get her back, the Blackfish said. When we're strong enough, when we have the leverage, we'll negotiate her release. Or we'll take King's Landing and free her ourselves. That could take years, Jon said. Then it takes years. She's alive. That's more than we can say for most of your family. True. Brutally, horribly true. Jon turned from the wall and walked toward the great hall, Ghost padding silently beside him. The Blackfish followed. Around them, Winterfell bustled with activity. Servants preparing for the coronation feast, soldiers drilling in the yard, smiths repairing armor and weapons. Life returning to the ancient seat of House Stark. The great hall was full when Jon entered. Every northern lord who had sworn to him was there, standing in rows on either side of the hall. At the far end, on the lord's seat where his father had sat, where Robb had sat, an empty throne waited. Jon walked down the center aisle, Ghost at his side. The lords watched him in silence, some with approval, some with uncertainty, all with the understanding that this boy had done what no one else could, had retaken Winterfell, had given the North hope. Lord Wyman Manderly stepped forward, carrying something wrapped in gray cloth. He unwound the cloth to reveal a crown, not the bronze circlet Robb had worn, but something older, simpler. A band of dark iron with 9 iron spikes shaped like longswords points outward, the crown of the Kings of Winter. The crown the Stark kings had worn before Aegon's conquest, before the North had bent the knee to dragons. Jon Snow, Manderly said, his voice carrying through the hall. You retook Winterfell from the Boltons. You rallied the North when all seemed lost. You gave us vengeance for the Red Wedding and hope for the future. The lords of the North have decided, we will crown you king in the North. Will you accept this crown? Jon looked at the iron circle, heavy, cold, utterly unlike the glittering gold crown southern kings wore. This was a northern crown, forged in winter and war, meant for rulers who understood that their duty was to protect, not to glory. He thought of his father, beheaded for trying to protect children, of Robb, murdered for his honor, of every Stark who had worn this crown or one like it, who had ruled the North for 8,000 years. He was not ready for this, was not worthy of this, but readiness and worthiness did not matter. The North needed a king, and he was the only Stark left who could take the crown. I accept, Jon said. His voice did not shake. I will be your king. I will protect the North. I will avenge our dead, and I will make our enemies remember that winter is coming. Manderly stepped forward and placed the crown on Jon's head. The iron was cold against his brow, heavy as stone. The king in the North, Manderly shouted. The king in the North. The lords roared back, their voices shaking the rafters. They drew their swords and raised them high. The king in the North. The king in the North. Jon stood before them, crowned in iron, flanked by a direwolf, and felt the weight of it settle onto his shoulders like snow. He was king in the North now. Jon Stark, legitimized by acclamation if not by law. The White Wolf, the deserter who had become a king. And somewhere in King's Landing, Tywin Lannister was learning that the North was not broken, that the Starks were not done, that the Game of Thrones had just become more complicated. The Red Wedding was avenged. Winterfell was retaken. But the war was far from over. Jon looked out at his lords, his army, his people, and saw the road ahead stretching endlessly. Battles to fight, alliances to forge, sisters to rescue, a realm to protect against threats from south and north, Lannisters and White Walkers, lions and ice. But he would face it all, because he was Pack, because he was Stark, because the North remembered. And winter had come at last. The end. Let us know what you'd like to see next in the comments section below.